Alright guys, thanks for clicking in the video, and I figured I would do this really quick because I have a friend that works at a place called Bellhousing Motorsports out in California, and the other day I was working on this S2000 and I had to do a clutch installation, and I thought, after talking to my friend, he gave me these like amazing tips and I was able to get the clutch in like super fast. I think I had it dropped in about an hour and I've never actually done an S2000 clutch before, so I figured I could at least share it with you guys. Okay, I don't want to waste anybody's time. I want to keep this video like super short so you guys can just get the best tips and get right to your day and get your clutch out or do whatever you gotta do. First thing you gotta do is take the battery. This one's completely removed, but make sure you disconnect it because, I don't know, it's connected to the starter, which is part of the things you gotta take off. So disconnect it just in case. At least just the negative cable. Okay, the next thing that you need to do is take out the shifter, twist off the knob, pop up this console, unplug the plug for the buttons here, and then there's a little ring that pops out. There's a few 10mm. Nothing's terribly complicated in this area. You guys will hit this, you'll get this out just fine. And the other thing you got to do once you have the shifter mechanism out is I like to lock the steering. Now it's not totally necessary, but later on in this video you'll understand why. But I just turn this until it locks, keeping the wheels as close to straight as I can, maybe just barely off of straight. And it'll help us when we disconnect this steering linkage. Okay, the next thing to do is something you wouldn't have to do on every type of car, but on the S2000, the header actually goes down and kind of reaches around in the transmission area. It makes it very difficult to do anything with it on there, so it's not really that much of a difficulty to take it off. It's just like maybe 8 or 10 bolts. So the next thing I would say is go ahead and pull your header completely out of the car. Okay, on this next one, it's a little hard to demonstrate because I'm holding the camera at the same time, but I have a long extension, and I mean like really long extension, and a wobbly, and I've even put some tape on this wobbly because it's a little worn out, and we need it to be able to go in the spot where it needs to, but basically you'll just need to get a little bend on it at the end. This is a 14mm socket. I believe that's what we use to take out the upper starter bolt. And on this particular car, you only actually have to pull the upper starter bolt, not the lower. So just leave the lower in, okay? It'll save you some time. You can see the intake manifold here, and the starter is down below it in the rear. You can't really see it. So this is probably the hardest, most discouraging part of this whole project in my opinion, because it took me a while to fish this through here. But the best tip I can give you is you stick it basically in here in the front, get under the intake manifold, weave it all the way through, and sometimes it helps if you can look through the top here. And you can kind of see where the starter is when you look down through here when you're shining a light. You can see it through the upper intake runner and sometimes down through the side. You'll basically have to use all three views to slide this extension and socket assembly down in there and wiggle it until you just get it right onto the actual upper starter bolt, and then just use your like wrench or whatever to crack it out. But it was so hard to fish through there, and people will say that it's not really doable, but it is. Once you fish it through there and you like wind the bolt all the way back out, I actually left the socket and the extension there for the whole rest of the project. And when I put the transmission back up, the other bolt was kind of sticking there, but it just pushed back. I was able to actually grab my extension and just twist it by hand and get the bolt to start and go right in, and then lock it down, and I didn't have to find it again. So that's just like another thing to make this a little faster. For this step, we're actually going to go ahead and elevate the car a little bit so I can show you underneath all the other stuff we're going to have to do. Okay, so for the next couple of things, it's kind of dark in this tunnel, and I've already put the trans back on, but if you look up here, you can see that there's like a shifter boot that is on the lower side. You actually have to take these 4 little 10mm out from the bottom for the transmission to drop out, but they're really easy to get to, so just go ahead and pull those things out. Okay, the next thing is kind of simple, and we're getting into stuff that you'd normally have to do on any rear-wheel drive car, and that is that we have to pull the actual drive line off. This is a pretty cool transmission because it just has a coupling, so fluid doesn't actually come out of the back or anything crazy. You just have to undo these bolts, and it's pretty straightforward. The only tip that I have for this part, and this actually saved me a little bit of time, is if you start in the rear, the driveline is up at a little bit of an angle, so you can actually get the lower bolts with like a straight socket. So, you know, crack these, turn them, you know, get this one out. Once you get the rear out, you can push it up, and then that will make it so that the front will have like a better angle so you can get your socket in straight, because right now this kind of like gets in the way, the actual throat of the drive line. So pull the back first, push it up so you can get the front bolts, just makes it a little easier. Okay, the next couple of things I'm just gonna mention, but you're gonna figure it out anyway. You do have to take off some wiring harness stuff. There's like O2 sensor plugs and transmission sensor plugs. You just go ahead and unplug them. They're not super hard or anything tricky about that. One of the next things you gotta do is pull this slave cylinder actually off of the car. It's just 2 bolts, it drops down. Don't crack this line, it'll just waste a lot of time. You have to re-bleed the clutch. So just drop this, slide it back and pull it off. And then in here, there's a shift fork, and you'll basically pop it straight out towards you. After you pull this little rubber boot off, it just pops out. It'll pull straight towards you, and that will disconnect the shift fork and allow the transmission to slide back. Up in this general area, let's see if we can show it. Can you guys see this right here? This is the steering knuckle. There's a screw here, or a bolt here, and a bolt here. And once you undo these, you can slide it, you know, up, and it will just drop down and off, and it will disconnect the subframe from the steering shaft. If you don't do this part, you're probably gonna break the steering. And one of the things that I did, if you guys can see up, let me see if I get some light up in here. If you guys can see up in there, I made like a little red mark on it, and that's just so that I knew exactly where it went when I put it back together. So go ahead and make yourself a mark, take a picture of it, whatever you gotta do to make sure you get it in the same position. And I only took it off of one side, that way I didn't have to worry about the other side. And then you just do your best not to spin it or move it at all, because on the inside of the car, it's connected to the clock spring, which is basically an electronic thing that connects all your buttons to the car that are on the steering wheel. And if you turn it too many times, it'll break the ribbon inside there and then you have to get a new one. The other thing is, if you move it like any direction, it'll make the steering wheel like slightly off. So this is like something that you want to take off and just kind of keep in one spot and put it on the same way, and then everything's okay. You know, just don't mess with it. Okay, now for this next part, it's gonna make sense why we have to disconnect the steering shaft. In order for the transmission back bell housing bolts to come undone, they come out and they actually will hit the firewall. So there's no physical way to get the transmission bolts out with the transmission all the way up in this position. So you have to lower it down. And the best way to do that is to just go ahead and drop the whole subframe down a bit so that the transmission lowers into what Honda calls the service position, I guess. And then you can go ahead and get to your upper bell housing bolts with a long extension, and you can go ahead and slide the transmission back. So the best way to accomplish this, let me see if I can show you guys these bolts. Basically, there's one bolt on this front corner, there's one bolt in the middle, and then there's one bolt on the front right here. So bolt, bolt, bolt. Go ahead and pull these middle ones all the way out, and then you can lower these two to the service position. This one doesn't have to go quite as far, it'll kind of tilt a little bit on the back, but this bolt is so incredibly long, I would never have thought you could drop the transmission down that far, but like ultimately, if you've gone down a little bit and the bolt, the upper 17 bolt to get the transmission separated isn't clearing the firewall yet, that means you have to lower these floor bolts down a little bit more, If you feel uncomfortable with this part, because obviously, you know, like the motor and everything's resting on it, could fall out, then take one bolt all the way out and see how long it is, and, you know, mark a length so where you got like enough bolt in that you feel comfortable with the weight, like maybe a full inch of threads or something, and then run it back up that amount and then lower it down to there. Okay, that's about it. After that, all you need to do is make sure you've got your clutch fork slid all the way out, which I mentioned before, and all your bell housing bolts out, and it should just slide right back off. I mean, keep in mind there's 1/2-inch dowel pins that go from the transmission to the block, so it will not actually start rotating or moving until you get it about, you know, 1/2 inch out of the motor. So I don't really have anything else. I really hope this helps. I was looking around for install videos just like this, and I could not find anything less than like 20 freaking minutes. And my friend that does these every single day for work, he gave me 5 minutes of tips, and it made my whole day so much better. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe. We have a shop, we do a lot of funny stuff. And I do put tutorials on Honda, Nissan, and other car related items, you know, up on this channel quite a bit too. So anyways, thanks for watching. See you guys later.